He walked confidently through the narrow streets of Ouagadougou, surrounded by discreet gazes and hands hidden in his pockets. It was an ordinary day, until a faint voice, coming from the hot, dusty ground, stopped him. "Sir, don't go in there." The man everyone called the leader hesitated. Before him, a skinny boy with bare feet and eyes too big for his age, held a secret. A secret that could change everything. In that moment, Ibrahim Traoré understood, sometimes, salvation doesn't come from above. It comes from where you least expect it. What if he had ignored that voice? I subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the next reports that reveal the most human side of great leaders. The heat in Ouagadougou was stifling that afternoon, and the streets vibrated with the sounds of old engines, hurried conversations, and footsteps echoing on the dry asphalt. Ibrahim Traoré walked in silence, dressed discreetly, accompanied only by 2 aides at a distance. He liked to feel the pulse of the city without escorts or protocols, as he had done when he was still just an anonymous soldier. The people did not know it yet, but that day would bring a silent turning point in their history. An invisible threat was approaching, and not even his most trained men could see it. Amidst the parked cars and makeshift tents, a boy was watching him. His bare feet were cracked by the hot earth, and his thin body hid an unexpected courage. He watched this man with his firm posture and measured steps with watchful eyes. Something was wrong. The boy could feel it, and he had learned to trust that kind of feeling. It wasn't just hunger or thirst. It was something else. A strange movement around the corner, a look that lingered too long, a presence that didn't belong there. The boy didn't know who the man was, but something told him he had to intervene. He walked quickly through the crowd, dodging boxes, motorcycles, and hurried legs. His voice was small but insistent. "Sir, don't go that way, please." Ibrahim stopped. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. He turned his head and stared at the boy, surprised by his boldness, intrigued by the firmness in his childish gaze. His aides approached, worried, but the president signaled for them to wait. "Why not?" he asked, his voice calm but serious. The boy swallowed hard. He pointed discreetly to an alley ahead, where a group of men had just disappeared. "They're waiting. They want your watch. And the car. I heard them talking. One of them has a big knife." Ibrahim kept his gaze fixed on the boy. There was no hesitation, no lie in his words. It was the raw truth of someone who lives on the streets and learns to read danger like an open book. One of the aides chuckled quietly, as if he doubted the boy's story. But Ibrahim silenced them all with a single gesture. He took a few steps to the side and peered carefully into the narrow, dark alley. The movement he saw confirmed everything. Silhouettes. Poorly hidden shadows. The kind of silent trap that almost no one would notice in time. That boy was not only right, he had saved a life. And not just any life. He had saved the commander of an entire nation. For a moment, the president said nothing. He just watched the boy. So small in comparison, yet so alert, so quick. He crouched down, leveling his gaze with the boy's. "What is your name?" he asked gently. The boy hesitated. He was not used to important men speaking to him. "Abdoulaye," he replied, almost in a whisper. Ibrahim nodded. He remembered the name. There was something about the boy that stirred more than gratitude in him. There was something rare there. Instinct. Courage. Truth. A plainclothes police officer appeared a few minutes later, alerted by the movement of the aides. The group in the alley was discreetly detained before taking action. The press never knew. No headlines were published. But there, on that sultry afternoon, a plan was dismantled by an invisible boy. And the president learned, once again, that true guardians don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they put dust and carry the street in their eyes. Ibrahim Traoré stood up, gently touched the boy's shoulder, and simply said, "You saved me today." These were not words thrown to the wind. They were seeds. And the boy felt it. Inside, something was changing. For the first time, someone saw him. Not as a problem, not as a burden, but as someone with value. Abdoulaye didn't know it, but that moment was beginning to write a new chapter for both of them. Before leaving, Ibrahim gestured for someone to give him something. One of the aides handed the boy a bottle of water, a sandwich, and a simple card with a handwritten number. "If you ever need me, call here." The boy kept the paper as if it were gold. "I didn't know if I would use it. But just having it on was enough." For the first time, he felt that perhaps he was not alone in the world. The presidential car, camouflaged among the ordinary vehicles, drove off without fanfare. But inside, the silence was reflective. Ibrahim looked out the window, the image of that boy still clear in his mind. He knew that that day would change something in his own view of leadership. Because leading, he thought, was not just about giving speeches or giving orders. It was about knowing how to listen to even the smallest voices. And that day, it was precisely one of those voices that saved his life. Abdoulaye grew up without a known surname, without documents, and without anyone who proudly called him their son. The streets were his home, his school, and his jungle. At 7, he already knew which markets he could sleep in without being kicked out, which guards were violent, and which vendors left food left in the corners of their boxes. He had learned to survive not with strength, but with perception. He observed everything, listened to everything, and never forgot a face. The city was his tired mother, who does not embrace, but also does not let die. That day stuck in his mind like a memory too hot to forget. Not because of the food, or the number on the paper, but because for the first time someone had stopped. Someone powerful had listened to him. It stirred something inside him, something Abdoulaye didn't even know he had: hope. But he was also smart enough not to fantasize. He knew that most adults disappear as quickly as they appear. Promises turn to wind. Cards turn to trash. He kept the paper, but he kept it carefully, without illusions. In the days that followed, nothing changed. He continued to sleep under the awning of the old butcher shop, stealing bread crumbs and washing his face in a leaky tap behind the pharmacy. But something in him had changed, even if the world hadn't noticed. He began to walk more attentively, less hunched over. He began to listen to the conversations around him with a different interest. He wanted to understand how important people worked. Because now he knew they could be deceived too. And he knew how to avoid it. Abdoulaye thought about Ibrahim more than he cared to admit. Sometimes he would catch himself looking at the police cars, trying to see if it was him inside. Other times, he would stare at the street where he had found him, as if it still held some echo of that moment. And without even realizing it, he began to guard that area like an invisible dog. Whenever he saw something strange, he would approach, disguised as an ordinary boy. But inside, he was a sentinel. Without a salary, without weapons. With only his eyes and intuition. Some adults laughed at him. They said he was going crazy, that he thought he was a cop now. But Abdoulaye didn't care. He had learned that no one laughs at the truth for long. And the truth was that he knew things that no one else did. He knew when a strange car was circling more than it should, when two men were whispering too close to the gates of the government building. He didn't need a diploma to understand danger. He could smell it in the air, like a street sniffer dog. One night he heard something that made him freeze inside. Two men, sitting on the sidewalk opposite, were talking quietly about getting it right this time. One of them mentioned Ibrahim's name. The other talked about someone on the inside helping. It was serious. More serious than anything he had ever heard before. The boy's heart sank. Could he ignore it? He could. He had done his part, right? But something inside him told him no. This was different. This was too dangerous to keep quiet. He thought about the card. He had been carrying that piece of paper for weeks, folded carefully, hidden in the insole of his foot. He had never used it. He had never had the courage. But now it was different. This wasn't about him. It was about something bigger. He waited for the men to leave, memorized their faces, and in that cold dawn, for the first time, he used the telephone of a merchant who let him sleep behind his stall. He dialed the numbers with trembling fingers. The voice on the other end was firm. "Who is this?" He answered bravely. "I'm Abdoulaye." I have something important." The line was silent for a long second. Then a second voice came on the line. It was deep, low, authoritative. "Speak." Abdoulaye took a deep breath and told him everything he had heard. Every word, every detail. He hadn't made anything up. He had just told the truth. There was silence on the other end. Then a dry thank you. And a promise to call back. The boy hung up and felt the world spin. Had he done the right thing? Was he meddling where he shouldn't? The fear was real, but something inside him was calming down. He had spoken. The next morning, unofficial patrol cars quietly surrounded the block where the men were. They were taken away without fanfare. No one said anything in the papers. No headlines. But Abdoulaye saw it. He saw their faces being taken away. And he saw a dark car with tinted windows stop for a moment on the other side of the street. The window rolled down just a crack. And the same look he remembered appeared. Ibrahim stared at him, nodded silently, and the car drove away. No words. But Abdoulaye understood. He had been heard again. And that day, something settled inside the boy. He was no longer just a street kid. He was a watchman. Invisible, but watchful. And deep down, even without medals, he knew he had become an important piece in the invisible chessboard that protects his land. The world didn't see him. But someone did. And that was all. The days passed in silence between Ibrahim and Abdoulaye, but there was something between them that words did not need to explain. It was as if an invisible line connected them, made of respect and something deeper, a mutual recognition. Ibrahim never forgot the face of that boy. In the midst of meetings, trips, and state decisions, his mind returned to that look. He knew what was there. It was not just courage, it was loyalty without demands, without exchange, without benefit. And that, in times of betrayal, was pure gold. Inside the palace, few knew the story. There were no records, no official reports. It was Ibrahim's personal choice to keep it a secret. He didn't want to turn the boy into a symbol, or expose him. He wanted to protect him. But he wanted more than that. He wanted to understand him. Who was Abdoulaye? How could someone so small have such courage? And why, among so many faces, was he the one who intervened at the right moment? These questions kept running through the president's mind. It was late one silent night that Ibrahim called his oldest and most trusted advisor. He told him the story, word for word. The man listened intently, eyes fixed, without interrupting. When Ibrahim finished, there was a moment's pause. He is not just a street urchin. He is a natural sentinel. A rare breed. The city shaped him. And if he saved your life twice, perhaps fate wants him close by. Ibrahim nodded. The thought had crossed his mind before, but hearing it strengthened him. Meanwhile, Abdoulaye was still on the streets. But something was changing. A man in a dark suit began to appear near the market where he usually slept. He didn't ask questions, he just watched. A white car began to park discreetly on the other side of the avenue. No one said anything, but the boy could feel it. He was being watched. Not out of threat, out of caution. It was strange, new, but it didn't bother him. He felt safe for the first time in his life. As if, somehow, he had stopped being invisible. One day, an envelope appeared, folded between two wooden boxes where he kept his things. Inside, a handwritten letter in firm handwriting. Abdoulaye, I would like to see you. Discreetly. Trust me. No signature. But he knew. His heart raced. He read it and reread it. He thought about running away, about ignoring it. But deep down, he wanted to go. He wanted to understand why someone like Ibrahim still thought about him. He wanted to listen, maybe even talk. Not out of pride, but because something inside him needed that conversation. On the agreed night, a simple car was waiting for him in an alley he knew. A man invited him in, without threats or impositions. Abdoulaye hesitated, but he got in. The journey was short and silent. When the doors opened, he found himself in a secluded, enclosed garden with stone benches and low trees. And there, sitting like an ordinary man, Ibrahim waited. He was wearing cotton pants and a light shirt. No uniform. No formality. Just a man wanting to talk to a boy. They were silent for a few seconds. Then Ibrahim spoke. "Do you trust me?" Abdullah nodded slowly. "And why did you help me if you didn't know who I was?" The boy took a deep breath. "Because it felt right. Because it was dangerous. And because no one else would do it." Ibrahim smiled, a short, rare smile. "You saved me twice. I won't forget that. But I want to ask you something even more serious. Would you accept learning?" The boy frowned, confused. "Learn what?" And the president answered. "To protect." "Really?" The conversation lasted for hours. Not about politics, not about positions. But about values, about choices, about what it means to care for a nation, starting with the watchful eyes of a child. Ibrahim told stories he had never told in public. Abdullah listened to everything without blinking. It was as if the world stopped for a while, allowing two souls so far apart on paper to meet in a place where power and poverty didn't matter. Only the truth. Just the desire to do the right thing. That night, before returning to the street, Abdullah received an invitation. Discreet, without pressure. A place to sleep. A safe place. He hesitated, but accepted. For the first time in years, he lay on a clean mattress, under a firm roof, without fear of being thrown out in the morning. He cried silently, not knowing if it was out of relief or longing for something he had never had. But he slept like he had never slept before. And he dreamed. He dreamed that there was still room for him in the world. That maybe, just maybe, he could be something more. On the other side of town, Ibrahim was also not sleeping. I thought about the boy. I thought about the future. Because something inside him told him that this connection was more than luck. It was destiny. And he knew, when life presents us with someone at the right time, we have an obligation not to ignore them. Abdullah had been a gift. A reminder that the most attentive eyes don't always come from above. And now, it was time to give back. Not with charity, but with purpose. Abdullah woke up early every day in the quiet shelter he now called home. It was not a palace, nor a barracks, but a simple, safe, clean space with folded clothes and hot food. The boy still found this new world strange. No shouting, no pushing. Just silence and the presence of a calm-spoken man who waited for him every morning with notebooks and questions. He didn't understand much at first, but he listened. And he always knew how to listen well. The man was called Amadou, a former advisor to Ibrahim, now in charge of something new, teaching the street kid to observe differently. Not with fear, but with technique. Showing the difference between a hunch and analysis, between instinct and reading. Abdullah did not go to a regular school. His learning was direct, practical, and secretive. He learned to memorize faces, to notice changes in the environment, to identify patterns in people's behavior. And most importantly, to avoid attracting attention. At first, he found it all strange. "Why learn this?" he asked. But little by little, he began to understand. The lessons applied to the streets he knew so well. Now he understood why the hurried steps, the averted eyes, the shaking hands. He understood that everything communicates something. And that people say more in silence than in words. This was more than just a school. It was a new lens through which to see the world. And Abdullah absorbed it all like a sponge. During the day, he watched old videos with Amadou. They analyzed real scenes, speeches, meetings, even interviews with Ibrahim. Amadou would pause the video and ask, "What do you see here? Who is uncomfortable? Who is lying?" The boy made mistakes, got things right, but always tried. At night, he would walk around the city again, now discreetly accompanied. He would look at markets, entrances to public buildings, police stations. It was like coming home, but with a new perspective. A trained perspective. Ibrahim followed everything from afar. He never interfered in the details, but he wanted short reports. Not with numbers. With impressions. Is he paying attention? Is he learning fast? And the answer was always the same, more than expected. The boy didn't just learn, he already knew. He just needed structure. Someone to tell him, "You are valuable." And Ibrahim did this without rushing. He didn't want to train a spy. He wanted to train a guardian. Someone who would think with his heart but act wisely. On a quiet afternoon, Abdoulaye was taken to a different place. A small government communications center, with screens, maps, and radios. There, he learned how information circulates. How messages are intercepted, how noises turn into alerts. It was all new and complex. But he didn't run away. He sat and listened, asked few questions, but memorized everything. The agents found it strange at first, but over time, they respected him. There was something about that boy that couldn't be taught. It could only be recognized. Amadou once gave him a real mission. Small but serious. To observe a suspicious man who was hanging around the headquarters of a foreign NGO. That was all. To see, to note, to report. Abdoulaye did it with precision. He observed for 3 days. He identified the pattern. He discovered that the man was leaving messages behind a closed newsstand. The result, a confirmed link to an illicit financing scheme. That was a shock to him. For the first time, his observation changed something real. It prevented an infiltration. And no one knew about it. But he knew about it. And that was enough. With each discreet mission, with each silent class, Abdoulaye was molded. He never stopped being a boy, nor did he forget the smell of the street. But something in him was growing. A sense of responsibility. A new kind of strength. Not the strength of the one who hits, but of the one who sees. Of those who protect without being seen. And deep down, he knew, he wasn't doing it for Ibrahim, nor for the money. I did it because it felt right. And because, finally, I had a place. A paper. A purpose. One weekend, Ibrahim showed up unexpectedly at the observation center. He asked to see Abdoulaye. When the boy entered, he looked serious, not knowing what to say. Ibrahim approached, put his hand on his shoulder, and said, "You are doing more than I ever imagined. But I want you to always remember, never lose your essence. It is what makes you special." The boy nodded. And at that moment, he understood that the greatest lesson was not in the cameras or the maps. It was in humanity. And so, the street kid who once saved the president by instinct, now learned to save by strategy. But without forgetting who he was. Because that was what Ibrahim wanted. And that was what Abdoulaye himself wanted to be. Someone invisible to the eyes of the world, but essential to the future of his land. The sun rose with a strangeness in the air. It was one of those mornings when everything seemed too quiet, as if the entire city was holding its breath. Abdoulaye felt it before he even left the shelter. The wind blew differently. Sounds seemed muffled. There was a heaviness in the air that he couldn't name, but his body recognized it. Something was about to happen. And he needed to be alert. Because when the city goes silent, it's because danger lurks in the shadows. At the observation center, the monitors showed the usual sights, markets, government buildings, roads. But there was a new signal. A foreign convoy would arrive in a few hours for a meeting with government officials. It was routine in theory. But Abdoulaye noticed something no one else had noticed. A motorcycle stopped too long near a dead traffic light. A man with a large backpack. A glance upward. And then he was gone. This was not normal. It was reconnaissance. It was preparation. He reported it immediately to his supervisor. The agent dismissed it at first. He could be a delivery man. But the boy insisted. He checked the previous cameras again. He spotted the same man in another area, 3 days earlier, making exactly the same gesture, looking up. It was no coincidence. It was a pattern. And where there is a pattern, there is a plan. The alarm was raised. Special forces began to move discreetly, without causing a fuss. The convoy was redirected for security reasons. And Ibrahim, who was to attend the meeting, was informed of the possible risk. As a precaution, Ibrahim decided to leave the palace through the secondary entrance that day. Abdoulaye, however, was not at ease. He felt that this was just the surface. There was more. He asked permission to investigate the area near where the motorcycle had started. Wearing a temporary badge and civilian clothes, he went there with 2 agents in an unmarked car. And that was when everything changed. They found a van with tinted windows, parked with the engine off. No one inside. But behind it, in a nearly invisible compartment, were cameras, microphones, transmitters. It was a mobile spy center. Professional. Silent. And foreign. Abdoulaye knew it was no coincidence. This wasn't just surveillance. It was an attempt to intercept routes, possibly for something much bigger. The boy made sure to record everything with his own cell phone. He wanted to have proof, even if it would never be made public. Because he knew, sometimes the truth needs to be protected by silence, but recorded with precision. And that day, once again, showed the value of his attention. Ibrahim was informed before the meeting began. The van was discreetly removed. No one involved was arrested there, but their faces were recorded. A silent investigation began. And at the center of it all, once again, was Abdoulaye. Not by luck, but by preparation. Because he had learned to read the invisible. To listen to what no one says. And above all, to trust what he feels. His name was not mentioned in the official reports. But he knew that it was written in invisible letters behind every right decision that day. When he returned to the center, Amadou was waiting for him. "Do you realize what you did today?" he asked quietly. Abdoulaye didn't answer. He just sat down, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes for a moment. Not out of tiredness, but out of gratitude. Because he knew that everything he had experienced on the streets, all the nights without a roof over his head, all the days without bread, had prepared him for this. They weren't just scars. They were signs. They were maps. And he had followed them all the way here. And now, they were saving lives. Late in the afternoon, Ibrahim called him. This time to his office. Officially. The boy entered tense, but was greeted with a smile and a gesture to sit down. The president was direct. "You understand that you are no longer just an observer. You have become a bridge between what is visible and what no one wants to see. And that is why today I want you to know you are part of my team." Formally. Abdoulaye did not know what to say. He simply looked at him, with teary eyes, and said, "Thank you for trusting me." The news was not released publicly. Abdoulaye still needed to be protected. But inside the palace, his name was already known among the agents. The undocumented boy was now called Sentinel. A title he didn't ask for, but wore with humility. He knew that the most important thing wasn't the title, it was the mission. And this, he had chosen to fulfill with all his heart. Because protecting Ibrahim, at that point, was no longer a debt. It was a choice. That night, as the city slept in the sweltering May heat, Abdoulaye looked up at the sky and smiled. He was no longer just a street urchin. He was part of something bigger. And even in the silence, he finally felt at home. Because sometimes, the most valuable warriors are not born in palaces. They are born in dust, in hunger, in abandonment. And when given a chance, they change the course of an entire nation. Time passed. And with it, Abdoulaye grew, not just in body, but in presence. He was still thin, his eyes sharp, but now he carried a posture on his shoulders that no one could ignore. He no longer walked hurriedly through the streets, nor did he hide in the shadows. His name was whispered in the corridors of power, respected by those who knew, protected by those who trusted. But outside of that, he remained anonymous. And that was how he preferred it. Because the most important work is done when no one is looking. Ibrahim kept in constant contact. The two formed a bond that needed no words. A look, a gesture was enough. They knew when the other was okay, and when something needed to be said. It was not a relationship of command, but of deep trust. And that, in a world of appearances and betrayals, was rare. Ibrahim knew that Abdoulaye had no ulterior motives. And that made him indispensable. Not as a soldier, not as a spy, but as a living conscience at the heart of power. In a private meeting, the president revealed a new plan. There would be a meeting of African leaders in a neighboring country. High risk, little real security. Infiltration and threats were already on the radar. And Ibrahim would be one of the targets. Abdoulaye listened to everything in silence. When the room was empty, he approached and simply said, "Let me go first." He didn't ask permission. He offered. He knew what he was doing. It was his way of giving back for everything he had received. And Ibrahim, after a long silence, agreed. He knew he couldn't stop him. Days later, Abdoulaye boarded the plane with a false identity, disguised as a sound technician at an event. No one recognized him. And there, with headphones in his ears and his gaze wandering around the room, he identified the signs. Men exchanging glances that were too silent. A tampered microphone. An extra cable on a metal structure. Details that would go unnoticed by anyone else. But not by him. Silently, he activated the security protocol. Local agents acted. And the plan was dismantled before it even began. Ibrahim arrived safely, without knowing that he was already safe before landing. When it was all over, the president was informed. Only 3 words were said in the report. The boy acted. And Ibrahim smiled. Because there was the truth. Abdoulaye was no longer a boy, but he was still that same boy with the pure gaze who had stopped him on the street one day. And now, in silence, in another land, he protected him without expecting applause, without seeking fame. He simply did the right thing. Because he understood that some missions are bigger than us. And the good we do, even when no one sees it, transforms everything. When he returned home, Abdoulaye didn't want a prize. He asked for just one thing, to be taken back to the street where he had first met Ibrahim. He wanted to see the place. He wanted to remember. And there, in front of the same alley where it all began, he stood in silence for minutes. The noise of the city remained the same. The motorcycles, the shouts, the dust. But inside him, there was peace. Because now he knew who he was. And more than that, he knew why he was there. Some street kids approached, curious. One of them asked, "Do you work with the president?" Abdoulaye smiled and simply replied, "I listen. And sometimes I let you know when something doesn't feel right." The boys laughed, but one of them just stared, thoughtful. Maybe he understood. Maybe in that moment, a new seed was being planted. Because that's how true heroes are born. In silence, by example. Not by speeches. Ibrahim continued to govern with courage. But he always told his advisors, "When I need to know what the people really feel, I will ask Abdoulaye." Because he knew. Sometimes, to listen to the country, you have to listen to the boy in the street first. The one who sees with his heart before his eyes. The one who had nothing, and therefore recognizes the value of everything. And so the story of that president and that boy continued. Not as a legend, nor as a fable. But as a silent truth. Because not every hero wears a uniform. And not all salvation comes with lights and flags. Sometimes she comes barefoot, with big eyes and a voice that says, "Don't go that way." If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now. Here you will find voices that the world ignores, stories that need to be told, and truths that the media never shows. Leave your like, share with someone who believes in the power of the invisible, and write in the comments, "I heard the boy on the street." Your voice matters too. Thank you for being here.